My son took over my bank accounts and treated me like a child until I reminded him who he was dealing with. But before I tell you what I did to get my life back, let me ask you something. Have you ever had someone you love make you feel small? Someone who was supposed to protect you but instead made you doubt your own mind? If so, write yes in the comments. I need to know I'm not alone in this. I was never one to need help managing my affairs. I paid off my mortgage before Malcolm even graduated college. I kept a little notebook where I tracked every dollar that came in and every dollar that went out. My balance was always precise down to the cent. I didn't grow up with much, so I learned early how to stretch what little I had. Money wasn't just numbers to me. It was security. It was independence. It was proof that I could take care of myself. That's why it stunned me when my own son, the same boy I once wrapped in a towel after his first swimming lesson, started treating me like I was the child. It all started the summer I turned 74. I had just come in from watering my tomato plants. The heat was heavy that morning, sticky and mean. I felt a little dizzy near the kitchen counter, but I chalked it up to not eating breakfast. Next thing I knew, I was waking up on the floor with my neighbor, Mrs. Hargrove, fanning me with a church bulletin. She'd seen me collapse through the window. An ambulance came. The hospital kept me overnight for observation. Just dehydration, they said. Nothing more serious than that. But when Malcolm arrived the next morning with a bouquet of fake flowers and more concern than I'd seen since his wedding day, I should have known something was coming. "Mom, we have to talk about your safety," he said, pulling up a chair beside my hospital bed. "What if you'd been alone longer? What if Mrs. Hargrove hadn't seen you fall?" He asked questions like he wanted permission to feel superior. I just listened, nodding along, thinking he was being a good son. How foolish I was. A few days after I came home, Malcolm brought over a banker. His name was Greg Young, oily smile with 2 white teeth and a folder already prepared. "It's just temporary," Malcolm said, guiding me to the kitchen table like I couldn't walk there myself. "Power of attorney, you know, in case anything ever happens again. I'll just be authorized to help with your accounts." I didn't like the sound of it. The words felt sharp in my ears. But Malcolm was my son, my only child. He rubbed my back while I signed those papers, his voice soft and reassuring. "I'll handle things until you're feeling stronger, Mom." His wife Tricia brought over soup that evening, smiling a little too wide. "We're just looking out for you, Mama V," she said, using that nickname she'd given me when they first got married. Back then it felt warm. That night it felt calculated. At first I didn't notice anything had changed. I still got my mail, still had my purse and my debit card. Then one morning I went to the grocery store to buy flour and yeast. My neighbor had asked for homemade rolls, something I'd been making for 40 years. My debit card declined. Confused, I tried again. Declined. I used my emergency credit card. It went through, but I stood there in that checkout line shaking like a leaf. The teenage cashier looked at me with pity and I wanted to disappear into the floor. I called Malcolm from the parking lot. "Not to worry, Mom," he said, his voice casual like he was discussing the weather. "I moved some things around. Just streamlining everything. You don't really need to handle that anymore." Those words hit me like cold water. You don't need to handle that anymore. Like I was a burden he'd finally figured out how to manage. If you've ever had someone dismiss your independence like it was nothing, drop a heart in the comments. I want to know who understands what that feels like. He started showing up with printouts of monthly summaries he'd made for me, speaking to me like I was one of his clients instead of the woman who raised him. When I asked about a missing bank statement, he told me they were going paperless now. "It's more modern, Mom. Besides, it's not like you read all those pages anyway." I let that comment slide, but it stung. Of course I read every page. I'd been reading bank statements since before he was born. Then Malcolm took my debit card, claiming it was just so you don't misplace it again. He set up a joint checking account for emergencies but never gave me access to it. When I called my insurance provider to ask about my premiums, they told me the point of contact had been changed to him. That's when I started writing things down again. Dates, names, amounts. I kept that notebook tucked inside a cookbook nobody ever touched, the same way I used to hide Christmas presents when Malcolm was little. Tricia started making jokes when she came by. "You still balancing that little checkbook? How vintage." They both laughed, but I wasn't amused. There was cruelty hiding behind their smiles. One day, I mentioned wanting to buy a new winter coat. Mine was threadbare, the zipper broken. Malcolm told me it wasn't in the budget right now. My own money, not in the budget. That's when I realized they hadn't just moved things around. They'd taken over completely. They were managing me like I was one of his business accounts. Or worse, like I was too feeble to think straight. You don't remember how cold it was last year, do you, Mom? Malcolm asked, smiling like I'd just proved his point. That's exactly why we're helping. They started making decisions about my house too. Trisha would walk through my living room like she was evaluating real estate. This place is too big for you now, she'd say. Wouldn't it be better to move into something cozier? We could help sell this and get everything settled. That word again. Help. It had started to sound like a threat. Then came the allowance. Malcolm called it monthly discretionary support. $150 loaded onto a prepaid card like I was a teenager getting lunch money. That was the breaking point. I called my nephew Reggie that same day. Reggie is my sister's boy, grew up spending summers in my house. He works in IT now, lives out in Raleigh. We kept in touch with birthday calls and Christmas cards, but we hadn't spoken at length in years. When I called, he picked up on the third ring. Reggie, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need your help. He didn't ask what for. Didn't ask why. Just said, I'll be there Thursday. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the budget sheet Malcolm had left behind. My name was on top in bold letters, but the numbers didn't belong to me anymore. I looked around my own home and felt like a guest. A tolerated guest. I hadn't lost my memory. I hadn't lost my mind. But I was losing my freedom. And Malcolm was about to find out exactly who he was dealing with. Reggie arrived that Thursday afternoon wearing his usual pressed jeans and a Carolina Panthers hoodie. He hugged me tight and didn't say a word until we were both seated at the dining table. I handed him my little notebook, the one I'd been keeping hidden. He flipped through it slowly, his eyes narrowing as he read each entry. You've been tracking all of this? He asked. I nodded. I never stopped. They just hoped I would. He pulled out a silver laptop from his backpack and got to work. While I brewed tea, he typed furiously, logging into sites I hadn't touched in months. My old passwords didn't work. Malcolm had changed everything without telling me. Reggie ran a trace on my social security number. That's when we found it. Foreclosed accounts. To others had been rerouted under something called Thompson Legacy Holdings. My name wasn't even listed as a secondary owner. It was all under Malcolm. He created a shell company, Reggie said, turning the screen toward me. And he's been using your money to fund it. My throat went dry. I leaned in, staring at the numbers on that screen. $88,000. Gone. Just like that. I sat back in my chair, hands folded in my lap, palms cold as ice. Can we get it back? I asked. Reggie looked me dead in the eye. If we have records and I know a good lawyer, yes. But you have to be careful. You can't tip him off yet. I nodded. I've been careful my whole life. What do we do next? He helped me download a small app on a spare phone and taught me how to screen record. Anytime he says something that sounds shady, record it. Don't confront him. Just keep gathering evidence. Let me ask you something. Would you have the strength to smile in your son's face while he was stealing from you? Would you be able to pretend everything was fine while plotting to take back what was yours? Tell me in the comments because I need to know if you think I did the right thing. I followed Reggie's instructions to the letter. Over the next few weeks, I pretended like nothing had changed. I complimented Trisha's cooking. I asked Malcolm how his business was doing. I even thanked him for taking care of everything, those words like ash in my mouth. But every time he slipped and said something like, my portfolio, or the equity in the house, I tapped that little red button on my burner phone and saved it all. One day he sat across from me in my living room and said, you know, Mom, it's honestly better this way. You don't have to worry about a thing. You get to enjoy life. No stress. I smiled sweetly. You're right, baby. I'm just so lucky to have a son like you. He grinned and patted my hand like I was a confused old lady who'd finally seen the light. He had no idea he was digging his own grave with every word. By the end of that week, Reggie returned with a folder thicker than a church hymnal. This is everything, he said. Account movements, email traces, IP logs, phone call transcripts. I looked at it all and felt that familiar click in my brain. The same one I used to feel when I caught a student cheating on an exam back when I was teaching. It was the sound of clarity, of pieces falling into place. I opened a drawer in my hallway, pulled out a dusty red folder, and handed it to Reggie. What's this? He asked. My original will, I said. And the contact information for my attorney. Her name is Cassandra Wynn. I haven't needed her in years, but I'm thinking it's time. I called Cassandra the next morning. She picked up on the second ring. Viola Thompson, she said, her voice smooth and sharp like good whiskey. I was wondering when you'd call me again. What's going on? Someone's stealing from me, I said. And it's my own son. She didn't gasp. Didn't hesitate. How soon can you get to my office? I was there by noon. Cassandra looked exactly the same as she had 5 years earlier. Tight natural curls, gold-rimmed glasses, red lipstick like she meant business. I gave her everything. Reggie's folder, my old documents, the recordings. She read through it all without saying a word, flipping each page slowly like she was studying for the bar exam all over again. Then she set it down and looked up at me. We're not going to confront them, she said. We're going to let them trap themselves. She explained her plan. First, she'd file for an emergency financial review and start drafting a legal injunction. Meanwhile, I would continue acting like nothing was wrong. The goal was to give Malcolm enough rope to hang himself with. Cassandra also updated my will. Everything I had, home, savings, insurance, would be moved into a trust in my name only, with clear provisions in case of mental incapacitation. She appointed Reggie as the secondary executor. You still have full control, she assured me. But we've added layers so this never happens again. And if they try to move me? I asked. Cassandra leaned forward. Call me. I'll have that injunction filed within an hour. If they try to relocate you, declare you unfit, or sell property without your consent, we'll bury them in legal paperwork. I walked out of her office with a new will in my purse and fire in my chest. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. At home, Trisha was sitting on my porch steps, scrolling on her phone like she owned the place. Hey Mama V, she said without even looking up. Malcolm's talking about listing the house soon. The market's hot right now. I smiled. Oh, is it now? Well, we'll just have to see what the future holds. She didn't notice the edge in my voice. She never was very bright. Inside, I folded the new will and placed it in a fresh envelope. Then I locked it in the same drawer where I kept my birth certificate and marriage license. This time, I wasn't going to wait for anyone to protect me. This time, I was going to protect myself. Malcolm had no idea that his little game of control was coming to an end. And this time, it would be on my terms. Drop a fire emoji in the comments if you think he got what he deserved. I want to see who's on my side. By the time Christmas decorations started showing up in stores, I had enough evidence to fill a filing cabinet. Malcolm thought he was so smart, using big words and talking fast, pretending I didn't understand half of what he said. But I'd been watching people like him my whole life. I taught high school math for 37 years. You don't scare easy after managing a classroom full of teenagers and grading tests with red ink until your fingers cramp. Reggie came by again in mid-November, this time with a printer and a portable scanner. You need hard copies of everything, he said. Digital stuff can disappear if they try anything slick. We spent the whole afternoon printing every screenshot, bank transaction, and email trail that had Malcolm's name on it. One email thread in particular made my stomach twist like a dish rag. Malcolm had been corresponding with a private real estate consultant about listing my house. Not hypothetically. There were digital renderings of what the place could look like once the elderly occupant is moved out. That was me. The elderly occupant. But that wasn't even the worst part. In another document, I found an appraisal form with my signature on it, submitted electronically 2 weeks prior. I had never seen it before in my life. You forged your signature, Reggie said, staring at the screen. That's a felony, Aunt V. I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I just walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood by the sink until I could feel my pulse slow down. Malcolm came by the next Saturday like clockwork, as if I were an elderly patient on his weekly rotation. He walked in without knocking, holding a box of organic groceries I didn't ask for. Trisha was behind him, already talking about her new side business selling custom pillows on Etsy. He sat down on my couch with that practiced smile and said, "So, Mom, we need to have a real talk about your future. You've done so much for this family, and we think it's time you really get to relax. No more worrying about bills, upkeep, any of that." I blinked slowly. Go on. There's this beautiful senior community just outside the city. Silver Pines. State-of-the-art everything. Gardens, activity rooms, nurses on site 24/7. They even do bingo on Wednesdays. He chuckled like it was some kind of treat. We already toured it, Trisha added. You'd love it there. And the best part is we can finally get that antique furniture appraised. Some of it might be valuable, just sitting here collecting dust. I looked at both of them, these two people who thought they had me all figured out. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't tremble. I had everything I needed now. That sounds lovely, baby, I said, keeping my voice sweet as pie. When were you thinking? Early January, Malcolm said. We're just waiting for a couple of offers to come in on the house, but don't worry, we'll handle the whole move for you. I smiled. Of course you will. That night, I called Cassandra from the flip phone she'd given me. They're moving forward, I said. They're planning to relocate me in January and sell the house. Her voice was crisp as winter air. Then it's time. I'll file the injunction tomorrow morning. Let them keep digging. We'll make this public if we need to. The next morning, I opened my mailbox and found a Christmas card from Malcolm and Trisha. It was a photo of them on a yacht somewhere tropical. Malcolm wore expensive sunglasses. Trisha had on a sun hat and held a glass of something bubbly. Inside the card, in neat print, it read, "Happy holidays from the future Mr. and Mrs. Thompson estate managers." No mention of me anywhere. I took that card, tore it in half, and dropped it in the trash. Then I poured myself coffee, opened the curtains, and stared out at my front lawn. It was still mine. Every blade of grass, every crack in the driveway, every rust spot on the old porch swing. Malcolm didn't come by the next weekend. He sent a text saying he was too busy with year-end financials. Trisha posted a picture on social media of their living room with the caption, "Manifesting a new space soon. Goodbye, old energy." They were so sure they'd already won. I spent the next week preparing with Cassandra. She helped me freeze any further account transfers. She filed the fraud complaint, the forged signature report, and the injunction to block the house sale. Reggie even set up hidden cameras in my hallway, just in case they tried to move me without consent. Every angle was covered. Every loose end tied up. Then Cassandra looked at me and said, "Thanksgiving is coming up. Invite them over. Say nothing about what we've done. Let them bring their smug smiles and their grand plans. We'll handle the rest." I smiled back. "You sure about this?" She leaned forward. "Mrs. Thompson, I've never been more sure of anything in my life." And just like that, it became a countdown. Are you ready to hear what happened when they showed up for dinner? Comment ready if you want me to tell you about the most satisfying Thanksgiving of my entire life. I cleaned the house from top to bottom. I baked cornbread and sweet potato pie from scratch. I set the table with the good china I hadn't used since my husband's funeral, even pulled out Malcolm's old place card from his high school graduation and set it next to a wine glass. Trisha called the night before. "We'll bring dessert," she said. "Hope you don't mind, but I invited a few friends. They've been dying to see the house before we make changes." "Oh, not at all," I said, my voice honey-sweet. "The more the merrier." Then I hung up the phone, sat down in my favorite chair, and let myself feel it. The peace. The power. Malcolm thought he had the upper hand, but tomorrow he'd find out exactly who raised him. And what happens when a mother stops playing nice. Thanksgiving morning came quiet and gray. A little drizzle tapped at the kitchen window while I stirred the gravy. The turkey was golden in the oven. The pies were cooling on the rack. My house smelled like cinnamon and home. I put on my cream-colored cardigan, the one Malcolm once said made me look too old-fashioned. I wore it anyway, like armor. They arrived at 1:15, late as usual. Malcolm barged in holding a store-bought cheesecake and complaining about traffic. Trisha trailed behind in a faux fur vest and perfume too strong for a dinner table. They brought their friends this time. Two couples, strangers to me, the kind of people who speak in polite tones but scan your home like it's a real estate listing. Malcolm's voice carried across the living room. "This place has great bones," he said to his guests. "We could knock out this wall, open up the kitchen. Really add some value." He didn't even look at me when he said it. Like I wasn't standing right there. Trisha ran her hand across my mantle like she was already redecorating. "The craftsmanship is amazing. They don't make them like this anymore." I smiled wide. "Make yourselves comfortable, everyone. Dinner's almost ready." I set the food out one dish at a time. Turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, colored greens, cornbread last. When everyone was seated, Malcolm tapped his wine glass with a fork. "Before we eat, I want to say a few words." I watched him stand up, holding his glass like he was making a boardroom presentation. "This year's been full of growth and hard decisions. Trisha and I have taken on new responsibilities, especially where family is concerned." He gestured toward me. "As many of you know, we'll be moving Mom into Silver Pines in January." Trisha cut him with a laugh. "Don't worry, it's gorgeous there. She'll be pampered like a queen. She deserves it after all these years." One of their guests leaned forward. "And what about the house?" Malcolm smiled that practiced smile. "We're already entertaining offers. This place has been in the family for decades, but it's time for a new chapter." I stood up then. Not fast, not dramatic. Just slow and steady, the way I'd been moving through life for 74 years. "Thank you, Malcolm," I said. But I have an announcement too. He looked confused for half a second, like a magician being upstaged at his own show. I won't be moving to Silver Pines, I said clearly. In fact, I've already made arrangements elsewhere. Trisha blinked hard. What do you mean? And this house? I continued, my voice steady as stone. It's no longer for sale. I've already taken it off the market. Malcolm set down his wine glass. Excuse me. I nodded toward the front door, which I'd left unlocked on purpose. Right on cue and walked Cassandra Wynne, her heels clicking against the hardwood, holding a leather folder under her arm like she owned the world. Mrs. Thompson, she said warmly, everything has been finalized. The injunction has been filed, the fraud report is active, and your updated will has been notarized. Trisha shot to her feet. Who is this woman? Cassandra smiled like a shark. I'm her attorney. And you're going to want to sit down. Malcolm's face went red as Christmas ribbon. You can't do this. You signed over power of attorney to me. No, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. You tricked me into signing a temporary document during a medical episode and then you exploited it. That's not help, Malcolm. That's theft. Cassandra laid down copies of the fraud complaint, the forged appraisal form, and the court motion to restore full control of my financial assets. You used her identity to open an LLC, she said. You drained over $80,000 from her accounts. You forged her signature to begin selling a home that didn't belong to you. That's multiple felonies. The room went dead silent. Even the strangers looked uncomfortable. You always said I wasn't sharp anymore, I told Malcolm, my voice quiet but strong. But it turns out I was just being quiet. And I let you show me exactly who you really are. You don't understand, he stammered. I was just trying to help you. No, I said. You were trying to control me. And now you've lost everything. Cassandra slid one final paper across the table. You've also been removed from her estate permanently. Her nephew Reggie is now the sole executor. Malcolm's mouth fell open like a broken hinge. And just so we're clear, I added, looking him straight in the eye, Reggie will make sure you never get near another dime of mine. For a full minute, nobody spoke. The only sound was the grandfather clock in the hallway, ticking away the seconds of Malcolm's old life. Finally, Trisha stood up and grabbed her purse. Come on, Malcolm. Let's go. But he didn't follow. He just stood there staring at me, his mouth open, watching his whole world crumble around him. Cassandra walked them to the door. If either of you attempt to contact her again without legal representation present, we'll pursue harassment charges. Have a blessed evening. The door closed behind them with a soft click. And then I laughed. It wasn't loud or hysterical. It was the kind of laugh that comes up from your chest after you've been holding it in for too long. I looked around the table at the half-finished plates, the silent guests, the untouched wine glasses. Then I picked up my fork and took a bite of sweet potato pie. It was perfect. Write justice in the comments if you think they got what they deserved. And share this story with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. The court date came fast. Cassandra had filed everything the Monday after Thanksgiving, and by Friday I was sitting in front of a judge with my cardigan on my shoulders and 3 folders full of evidence in my lap. Malcolm showed up late, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His suit didn't fit right and his eyes were sunken deep in his skull. Trisha wasn't with him. I heard through Cassandra that she'd gone back to her mother's house in Atlanta to get some space from the mess he'd made. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The judge was a no-nonsense black woman with short gray curls and glasses that meant business. She read through our documents in complete silence, lips pursed, occasionally making notes. Cassandra spoke with the kind of calm authority that rattles people like Malcolm. She laid out the entire timeline. How I'd been misled into signing temporary power of attorney during a medical episode. How Malcolm had rerouted my funds into a fraudulent LLC. How he'd forged my signature on appraisal forms. How he'd planned to move me into assisted living so he could liquidate my assets without my knowledge or consent. Malcolm tried to interrupt. Your Honor, she's confused. My mother's memory isn't what it used to be. I was just trying to protect her from. The judge didn't even look up from her papers. I've reviewed the audio recordings, Mr. Thompson. She doesn't sound confused to me. You do. He sat down hard. Cassandra submitted the bank records, Reggie's digital documentation, copies of the forged signatures, and transcripts of recorded conversations. She presented a clear case of financial misconduct, power of attorney abuse, and elder exploitation. The judge nodded slowly as she reviewed everything. I see cases like this more often than I care to admit, she said. But this is one of the most calculated examples I've encountered. Malcolm looked at me then, his eyes pleading like a little boy who'd been caught stealing cookies. Mom, please. This isn't what it looks like. I love you. I was just scared of losing you. I leaned forward in my chair. It looks like you stole from me, Malcolm. It looks like you wanted me out of the way so you could spend my money. And it looks like I finally did something about it. He had no response to that. The judge's ruling was swift and comprehensive. My full legal and financial control was restored immediately. Malcolm's power of attorney was revoked retroactively. He was ordered to pay full restitution for every cent taken, $88,000 plus interest and attorney fees. The LLC he'd created using my identity was dissolved on the spot. Any future attempts to access my accounts, contact my service providers, or interfere with my property would result in criminal charges. After the ruling, I didn't look back. I walked out of that courthouse with my shoulders high and my dignity intact. I could feel something shift in the air outside those marble steps. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was something deeper. I'd gotten my name back. My life back. My power back. If you've ever had to fight your own family to reclaim what was yours, drop a crown emoji in the comments. You're royalty in my book. Cassandra drove me to the bank herself. We walked in together and the manager greeted me like I was back from the dead. Mrs. Thompson, he said, eyes wide with surprise. We didn't know you were back in control of your accounts. I smiled. Well, now you do. We corrected every document, changed every contact, reset every password. I closed the joint account Malcolm had created without my permission and opened a new private one in my name only. I even updated my emergency contacts. Reggie was listed first, Cassandra second. Malcolm's name was nowhere on any piece of paper. By December, my house was legally protected under the new trust. My monthly income was secure again. I had prepaid legal services on standby and a new accountant that Reggie personally vetted. Everything Malcolm had touched was systematically undone. As for Malcolm himself, he lost his job 2 weeks after the court ruling. Word travels fast in financial circles, and once it got out that he'd been accused of elder abuse and identity fraud, his firm didn't want that kind of liability on their books. Trisha filed for separation soon after. She'd only married him for the illusion of stability he provided, and once that crumbled, she was gone faster than smoke in the wind. Last I heard, Malcolm was renting a small duplex on the edge of town, the same neighborhood he used to call sketchy when we drive through it. The luxury SUV got repossessed. He tried applying for financial licenses again, but the pending fraud investigation made it impossible. He ended up taking part-time work at a credit repair agency. Not running it, mind you. Answering phones. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was now working for people trying to recover from financial abuse. As for me, I bought a beautiful 2-bedroom condo near Reggie and his family. No stairs to worry about, no noisy neighbors, and a little garden out back where I grow tomatoes again. My new place is small, quiet, and entirely mine. Every morning I wake up, brew my own coffee, and check my own bank accounts. No one tells me what's in my budget. No one hides my passwords. No one calls me forgetful when I ask perfectly reasonable questions. Reggie visits every Sunday with his wife Monique and their little girl Isla. She calls me Auntie V and shows me every single flower in my garden like she's discovered buried treasure. One afternoon, Reggie asked me, Aunt V, do you miss him? Miss them. I thought about it. About the little boy I raised. The one who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call me Mama Bear. The one who called every Friday when he was away at college. The one who used to hug me with both arms like he never wanted to let go. I miss who he used to be, I said finally. But I don't miss who he became. Reggie understood. He always did. That night, I sat by my window looking out at the stars. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't feel watched or managed or doubted. I felt free. Malcolm finally got what he'd always wanted. He got to be in charge of his own life. Unfortunately for him, he'd destroyed it in the process. The first Christmas after everything went down was quiet in the best possible way. No big dinner with fake smiles. No gifts from Trisha wrapped like department store displays. No pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I spent it with Reggie's family. Their little girl made me a construction paper ornament with my name spelled out in glitter. We ate ham and watched old movies and laughed until our sides hurt. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. And real was something I'd been missing for a long time. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Malcolm's handwriting, sloppy and rushed like he'd written it in a hurry. He didn't apologize. He didn't even mention the court case or the money he'd stolen. He just wrote that he'd been struggling since Trisha left, that he'd lost everything, that he was working a job he hated and living in a place that smelled like cigarettes and regret. And at the bottom, a single sentence that hit me harder than I expected. I thought I was protecting you. I folded that letter and placed it in the same drawer where I kept my old checkbooks and tax returns. I didn't cry over it. I didn't rage about it. I just sat for a while thinking about the kind of protection that takes everything from someone and calls it love. In January, I sold the last remaining asset that had Malcolm's fingerprints on it, a storage unit he'd been using to stash boxes of old business files and furniture he'd moved out of my house without permission. The money from that sale went straight into a scholarship fund I started at the local community college for awards a year for first-generation students from single-parent households. I named it after my late husband Harold, who would have loved the idea of helping young people get an education. Every time Malcolm tried to access anything connected to my name after that, an old email account, a credit report inquiry, it triggered an alert through Reggie's security system. Cassandra would call me within the hour. Just a ping, she'd say. No action needed, but I thought you want to know he's still trying. I do want to know, I'd tell her. And thank you for watching out for me. By February, I'd developed a routine that was entirely my own. Mornings were for coffee and reading the newspaper cover to cover. Afternoons were for my garden and whatever book I was reading that week. I even started writing in a journal Reggie's daughter gave me for Christmas. Not to record what had happened, that was behind me now, but to remember who I was and who I'd always been. I wrote about the day I bought my first car with money I'd saved from my teaching job. About the time I convinced the principal not to expel 3 students because I believed in them when nobody else would. About Malcolm's birth and how I'd rocked him through fevers and nightmares. That version of him, the little boy who needed me and loved me and respected me, he lived in my memories. But the man he became, the one who saw me as a problem to manage and money to steal, I had buried that version with the last lie he told. In March, I got a knock on my door that I wasn't expecting. It was Malcolm. He looked thinner than I'd ever seen him, ashen and hollow-eyed, hands fidgeting at his sides like he didn't know what to do with them. He didn't bring flowers. Didn't bring a gift or an excuse. Just himself, standing on my porch like a boy who'd forgotten how to be a man. Mom, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Can we talk? I stood there in my doorway for a long moment, looking at this stranger who used to be my son. Then I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. We're not doing this in my home, I said firmly. He nodded like he understood. Okay. We sat on my porch swing, the same one he used to love when he was little. He looked around at my small garden, the wind chime Reggie's daughter had made me, the rocking chair I'd found at a flea market and restored with my own hands. I lost everything, he said finally. After the court ruling, after Trisha left. I've been working part-time, sleeping on a friend's couch. I deserved it. I know I did. I said nothing. Sometimes silence is the most powerful response you can give. I was scared, he continued, his voice cracking slightly. Of losing you, of not being in control of anything in my life. I thought if I managed everything for you, maybe I could finally make up for all the years I wasn't around enough. But I got greedy. I know that now. I stared at the street lamp across the road. It flickered softly in the growing dusk. I'm not asking for money, he added quickly. Or forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be better. Trying to understand what I did wrong. I turned to look at him then. His hands were shaking slightly and I could see the boy I once knew buried somewhere deep in his eyes. You betrayed me, Malcolm, I said, my voice quiet but clear. You turned me into a problem to manage, a spreadsheet to balance, a burden to shuffle aside. You called it love, but it was control. You stole from me and called it protection. He blinked rapidly, his jaw trembling like he was trying not to cry. And still I continued, my voice softening just a fraction, you are my son. He looked up then, hope flickering in his tired eyes. But you are no longer my legacy. The hope died as quickly as it had appeared. He bowed his head. I stood up slowly, opened my screen door, and stepped inside. As I was closing it, I heard his voice, barely above a whisper. I miss you, Mom. I paused with my hand on the door handle. I hope someday, I said without turning around, you'll grow into the man I raised, not the one you became. Then I shut the door. And that was the last time we spoke. If you've ever had to love someone from a distance to protect yourself, write boundaries in the comments. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. Now when I walk through my condo, every room speaks peace. There's no tension hiding behind the furniture, no stolen passwords or redirected mail. Just me, my name, and my freedom. Reggie stops by every weekend with little Isla. They bring fresh muffins from the bakery down the street, and we drink coffee on my back porch while she chases butterflies in the garden. He updates me on the scholarship fund. We've helped 8 students so far, 2 of them young women who remind me of myself when I was working double shifts to put Malcolm through college. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine again. And when people ask me how I bounced back after what my son did to me, I tell them the truth. I didn't bounce. I stood up. And I decided never to let anyone sit me down again. Last month, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. One of my former students, a girl I taught 20 years ago, was getting married. She'd written a note on beautiful stationery. Mrs. Thompson, you always believed I could do anything. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. I hope you can come celebrate with me. I bought a new dress for that wedding. Lavender with tiny pearls on the sleeves. I sat in the 3rd row and cried happy tears when she walked down the aisle, radiant and confident and free. That's the legacy I want. Not money in a bank account or property deeds with my name on them. I want to be remembered as the woman who stood up, who refused to be diminished, who showed others that it's never too late to reclaim your power. At the reception, the bride found me during dinner. Mrs. Thompson, she said, I need to tell you something. When I was 16 and my parents were getting divorced, you pulled me aside after class one day. Do you remember what you said? I shook my head, smiling. You said, baby girl, other people's chaos doesn't have to become your story. You get to write your own ending. That's what I did. And that's what you did too, isn't it? I squeezed her hand. We both did, sweetheart. We both did. As I was leaving that night, I realized something profound. Malcolm had tried to write my ending for me. He'd decided I was too old, too confused, too much trouble to manage my own life. He'd planned to tuck me away somewhere convenient and spend my money like I'd already died. But I got to write my own ending instead. And it's a good one. Before I finish this story, I want you to do something for me. Look in the comments and tell me where you're listening from. Tell me what time it is where you are. Because every single one of you represents something powerful. You represent people who believe that women like me matter. That our stories deserve to be heard. That dignity doesn't have an expiration date. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video if you believe that standing up for yourself is always worth it, no matter how old you are or who's trying to keep you down. And if you're going through something similar, if someone in your family is treating you like you don't matter, remember this: you are not too old to fight back. You are not too tired to demand respect. You are not too anything to reclaim what's yours. I'm 76 years old now and I've never felt stronger. Every morning when I wake up in my little condo, I make my coffee exactly the way I like it. I check my bank balance on my own computer, and I decide how I want to spend my day. No one tells me what I can afford. No one hides my mail. No one makes decisions about my life without asking me first. And you know what? That's exactly how it should be. Malcolm learned that when you try to bury someone who's still got fight left in them, you better make sure they're actually finished. Because if they're not, they'll claw their way back up and remind you exactly who you're dealing with. I'm Viola Thompson, and this is my story. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing that women like me still have something important to say. And remember, it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Never too late to say no. Never too late to write your own ending. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more stories like mine. Because there are so many of us out here and we all deserve to be heard. Now if you'll excuse me, I have tomatoes to water and a life to live. On my own terms.